For those of you that might have participated in our previous panel, we have some fabulous returnees, and then we have some exciting new people that have come to join us. So I first want to introduce the panelists. My job here tonight, I'm Nicki Salfer. I am an interventionist as well as a BCBA, but my job tonight is to moderate this panel, which I'm quite excited about. Dr. Shapiro, we welcome you back. I think this is the third time. I think we've done face-to-face, and this is the second Zoom. It is a pleasure to have you. He's a clinical psychologist, has written textbooks on clinical psychology, and we're excited to have you tonight. Kathy McAfee is an intervention specialist for Tree of Knowledge, as well as working in the Hebrew Academy. I have the opportunity to work with her because in a certain way, she's my supervisor. But I really enjoy her work, and I thank her for being here. Chana Perel Handler is a social worker for over 10 years in clinical practice, and she's joining us from the mental health perspective. And then we have also a little bit of a returnee, which is Naomi Gallor. And Naomi Gallor worked in the Tree of Knowledge office. She then went on to pursue transferring her Canadian OT license to an Ohio license, and now works for Aisha Torah, but also practicing OT. And so we are excited to have you as well. We want to thank Sheila, our educational director in Cleveland, for putting this together. This will probably be seen by many people in Ohio, New Jersey, and Florida. We recognize that each state has a little bit of different things going on, but we are united in having spent since March dealing with COVID-19 and a new term that I heard today, maybe even COVID 2020, which I'm not going to talk much about because I don't know anything about it. The goal here, our title for tonight, was transitioning into a new world. And I'm not sure what that new world looks like because every 10 minutes it kind of changes. But what we hope to do tonight is kind of talk a little bit about how we teach our children through this stress, through this time period. And so that our goal and our hope is that they will come out more resilient. I want to start with Dr. Shapiro. One of the positives that people have been talking about kids raised during this time is that maybe there's the hope that they will, come out with a stronger resilience gene, something that we were seeing a little bit of a lack of prior to this. And I wanted you to address how stress affects children today, and do you think that maybe as going through this and having to go through many changes in their educational system, that they may, come out to be more resilient?
Well, the answer, fortunately, is yes. It's not inevitable, but it's certainly possible. And I think one aspect of the parental endeavor can be to look for possible ways to make lemonade out of lemons. The pandemic is like other stressors. Nobody wants challenges and nobody wants hard times and stressors, but the research is completely clear that resilience does not develop in the absence of adversity. And to be a little bit wonky here, I'm going to say that research on the relationship between childhood stress and adult resilience shows that there is a curvilinear relationship between the two, in which the most resilient adults were children that faced a moderate amount of stress as they grew up. And children that either face severe stress as in abuse or neglect, and children that have these absolutely smooth coasting childhoods actually emerge as the adults that have less ability to cope with hard times that come upon them. And so this can provide sort of a framework, not only for parents, but even to an age appropriate extent with kids, that we didn't ask for this, we don't want it, but it's here. And that means that this is our opportunity to develop strengths and to develop toughness, to develop resilience, to develop coping ability. For some kids can really understand if we say, this is kind of like our World War II. This is the big challenge of this period in history. And we can use our ingenuity and we can work together as a team to develop the skill of, you can call it coping. I like the term making the best of an unwanted situation. What can we do to make the best of it? Kids can sometimes become interested and stimulated by that endeavor, and that does provide a good framework for developing strengths in the midst of stress.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of today. I am recording tonight from my house because I'm in New Jersey and I couldn't be in my New Jersey office because we've had some COVID-related employee issues. And I can tell you that every 10 minutes when you're changing, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be there, let me reset up my technology there, let me reset up my technology there. I find that by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. Just from what I call the 10-10 wins, every 10 minutes having to change, that there's no planning, you never know what's going to happen. Chana Perel, you want to address what that's like, the anxiety, the never-ending not being able to plan?
Sure. Yeah, so it's interesting. When I specialize in the field of trauma, and very often when I'm doing trauma assessments and I'm gathering information from my clients, I ask them how they found out about the trauma or how they discovered it or how it was exposed to them. Because very often if you have the ability to plan or the prior knowledge, you have stronger internal resources to be able to cope better. And often the element of surprise is what's so exhausting. And the inability to anticipate what you're going to walk into is what's so draining. So, the good news is that crisis mode releases extra chemicals in our brain, right? So that's why sometimes people will thrive during crisis or they'll have extra their sense of eyesight or hearing or ability to engage in something will be stronger because they're kind of in that fight, flight, freeze. I'm going to maximize what's going on and really overcome and do well in this challenge. The bad news is that crisis mode is not supposed to last 10 months, right?
Right.
So now we're in this situation where we kind of have to take a step back and see within our own framework, what kind of resources can we really develop and what kind of self-care can we really engage in and how can we kind of build ourselves up in when things are calm, whatever that calm can look like, so that when we're inevitably hit with the unknown and when we're inevitably hit with schools canceled or, okay, now we're working from home or not going on the bus, but I don't know if my carpool's coming, we kind of built ourselves up when we had that lull. So sometimes it can even just be as simple as, eating better, working out. Some kids can engage in, I know here in Cleveland, they'll still have gymnastics. So they'll get their social needs met. They'll get that safety and security of that structure met. So when we can, intentionally engage in some kind of routine or some kind of pattern, we're taking a break from that crisis mode so that when it has to kick back in, it's not like it's been constant, but we were able to kind of refuel and then handle these elements of surprise and these shifts in a more productive, less exhausting way.
So you used a great term, which is called self-care. And this would be a great segue for Naomi to help us. What are some self-care things that kids can do so that they can kind of exactly what she said, which then when we're in crisis or they have to switch, they can make use of that knowledge?
So I'm going to actually answer your question a little differently than expected. I'm actually going to say and focus on the self-care of the parent in this situation. Right. Because the old analogy, we can't put on our child's oxygen mask sitting on the plane until we put on our own. So professionally, being a working mom with 4 young kids at home, I'm going to bring my expertise as a mom here during this pandemic. And what has really helped myself and many other moms I speak with really get through it is taking care of ourselves. And sometimes moms and parents are not always the best at that. We do always put our children first. And I think although that's lovely, we can't really help them through their crisis mode if we are in crisis mode ourselves. So I think it's really, really important to address that piece. And I'm happy to talk about the kids too, but that's what I wanted to bring to the table today. We have a lot of amazing professionals here on the panel tonight. I think from my perspective as a mom, that is so crucial. And I see it over and over with my caseload, with community members, with friends, there is this piece missing where we forget to take care of ourselves. Everything that Chana Perel just mentioned, gymnastics for kids. Where's the exercise for busy moms and dads? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you going for a walk? Are you getting together in a safe way, in a socially distanced way? Are you having human interaction? Or are you constantly taking care of your children and moving from crisis mode to crisis mode? So
I appreciate that, because so much of the anxiety that I was talking about in the beginning gets transferred.
Yep.
If we're very anxious, then they're very anxious. Kelly, you want to talk from a teacher's perspective? Self-care for teachers?
You mean for the teachers themselves? Yes, I can do that. Naomi makes a good point that parents need to take care of themselves. And of course, the teachers need to do what they need to do to take care of themselves as well. I wanted to hit on too, though, as an extension of kind of what Naomi was talking about. So for students themselves, when they're in this online situation, one of the things that I found as I'm teaching, because I teach as well at this time, is that sometimes they're just not prepared. So some of my students come and they have everything that they need right in front of them, and some don't. And so in that moment, they're in their own little mini crisis. Oh my gosh, I don't have a piece of paper. Where can I get a piece of paper? So if the parents can help like work with the teachers and say, what exactly are they going to need every day? Have that at a station where they have the paper that they need and the pencils that they need and the whiteboard that they need, everything right in front of them. And also to have a schedule for them listed so that the student doesn't wonder what's going on. They know exactly what's going to happen. That will help them stay out of crisis mode, which will then, help the teacher because.
Right. It's really all a circle when it comes to education. But I want to address also some of the guilt or some of the frustrations that moms are like, okay, we're in this for a long time, Dr. Shapiro. We weren't meant to be a teacher. We weren't meant to be doing homeschooling for the rest of our lives. We just keep thinking, oh, one more week, and they have a lot of struggle because for the first time, they're not only just the parent, they're also the teacher. Because exactly what you just said in terms of even preparing them for a Zoom meeting, parents used to do that like in the morning before they let their kids go off, but then they had a little bit of a break. And now Zoom meetings are like every hour on the hour. They are new Zoom meetings. Sometimes they have to reset up. Classes are changing online. And now it becomes a parent role to make sure that they're kind of like the enforcer. And I think that's putting a lot of pressure on mom. Dr. Shapiro, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I mean, if there was somebody to whom the job could be handed over, then I would say that sounds good, but please don't think that the psychologists of the world are going to step in and do this. I think, it's kind of inherent to parenting. I mean, if God forbid, if your child develops a chronic medical illness, then you didn't mean to be a nurse, but I guess you're a nurse. And the same would be true of a therapist or a teacher. The buck stops there. So it can't be taken away. And again, I think it really helps people when it's much, much psychologically more comfortable and more effective to believe that you're a good person in a very hard situation than to believe that you're kind of a fraying, unraveling person in a situation that isn't really all that hard. So I encourage both parents and kids to have respect for the difficulty level of the situation that they're in, because then when they start feeling tense and they start having, scared thoughts, they can construe it as, I'm kind of a soldier in this situation. This is what people are talking about when they talk about a tough situation. There's nothing wrong with me. I need to recognize that reality and sort of gird up my loins and face it, because that's a very different experience from feeling like I'm failing. What's wrong with me? Nobody else is having trouble.
Chana Perel, as a social worker, what would you say that the families can do together to try to work through some of this stress, added jobs?
It's probably good to sit around and have little family meetings about like, how is the pandemic affecting you and how is it affecting me? It's nice to kind of, is there anything good that's coming out of it? Are there strengths that we're discovering in ourselves? Are there opportunities for the older children to help the younger children? Are there opportunities maybe to help mom or dad to try to look for, nothing about it is going to be easy, but that doesn't mean that nothing about it can be good. Things can be difficult and good. And we do ourselves a lot of benefit by searching out those opportunities for silver linings or blessings in disguise, because there's no way to take away the difficult part. Of course, we should look for opportunities for treats. We should look for things that can inject some positive emotion into our days and into our evenings. Maybe it's like a special little musical concert with, let's dance our little heads off for 20 minutes in between this class and that class. Exercise is great. Mindfulness is good. I hope everybody knows about apps like headspace.com or calm.com. I'm not sure whether people already know, but if you don't, you can jot those things down. There are apps, there are websites that have little mindfulness exercises that are very age appropriate for kids that are young. We have to intersperse something in between these Zoom classes, because focus and concentration are finite resources, and they just get used up sometimes, and then it's just not going to work. So we have to find ways, even if it's our kids, to literally run around the room, put on some wild music and just like dance exuberantly for 3 minutes. These are the kinds of tricks that can inject some positive energy into the days.
Chana Perel, what about, let's talk about family meetings and how much we allow for sharing of feelings and things like that. What some of the structure of that kind of stuff can look like.
Sure. So, I always say, even as a therapist, I gave a presentation, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years ago to a group of grad students about the balance of engaging and validating your clients and also helping them meet their goals and engage in some change, right? So you don't want to be overly validating to the point that they now feel victimized, right? And you're right, my life is terrible. You also don't want to push for change and, okay, well, what are you going to do about it if they don't feel understood and validated? So I think that one of the, the best kind of lines and balances that parents can develop when, in a crisis or in an uncomfortable situation or in, in this case, a worldwide pandemic, is that honest validation. Like, yeah, it's rough for me too. I appreciate that you shared that with me. Looks like you're having a hard day. I had one of those yesterday. And then going to the, what ideas do you have? What do you think we can do about it? So one of my favorite authors and trainers, her name is Jamie Merritt. She's very open about her addiction. And she said that her first sponsor said to her when she learned about her life, she said, Jamie, after everything you've been through, it's no wonder that you developed an addiction. Now, what are you going to do about it? So I think that kind of mindset working with children and families is like, yeah, this is really rough. What do you think we should do about it? So on the one hand, there's the, open conversation with the validating and the problem solving. And then on the other hand, this is a little bit of a different kind of a tangent, but it kind of flows with empowering children. Try to give them control over anything that you can that doesn't really make a difference to you. So I tell parents, asking the kids, hey, which pair of pants do you want to wear today? They're going to wear pants. So it doesn't matter what they choose. Or, did you want to leave now or did you want to leave in 5 minutes? Or which cereal do you want for breakfast? Which place at the table do you want to sit? Something that they're going to do anyhow. So it's not like you're putting yourself in a position, well, what if they say no? They're going to sit. They're going to have cereal. But this way they feel like they have a little more control over this life where they really don't have control. Because, a need for control is a basic human innate need, right? And it's stripped away. We all realize this was, some of us took a little longer and some of us are still taking our time, right? You said no politics.
We're in different stages. We're in different stages. And by the way, one of the things that has kept me going through this entire period is the years ago, we had, for Tree of Knowledge, we had a speaker that came and talked about how parents of children with special needs go through the 5 stages of grief multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I'm thinking that during the pandemic, we're in an hourly multiple stages of grief here. And at any moment, we can be in the denial period, we can be in the sad period, we could be in okay, we're in this together. So it's not a one-time experience. And I think that's the same thing for children. It's not like, oh, hey, I'm cool with this pandemic. I'm loving Zoom. No, 10 minutes later, they could be right in that anger mode all over again, you know? So I think that's what we're seeing in that. Naomi, as a parent, since you want to be really addressed as a parent, does this work for you? Have you tried any family meetings? How are you doing with this?
I wanted to just mention what you said about the constant changing and the 10 minutes. You could be rocking it out, and for 10 minutes you're on your game and all your kids are on Zoom and everything's, going fine and dandy. And then, as you said, 10 minutes later, everyone's crying, everyone's melting down. And I think the main key for parents and for moms and dads out there, what I want them to hear is, and we know this word to be a very sort of soothing and helpful word, but now more than ever, we need to implement it, is gentle. We need to be gentle on ourselves. We are being tasked with the impossible right now. I use it personally, and I use it for my kids. And when I see them, not being able to cope, I think, I wonder if I was in this situation, if I was in third grade or first grade, and I was sitting and I was having Zoom fatigue and trying to, and I'm already a disorganized kid. Two of my children have difficulties in a regular classroom at the best of times. Now you put them in front of Zoom, they don't know what's flying. They can't find their pencil. They can't find their book. It's all over. It's overwhelming. It's so overwhelming to these children. So being gentle and kind to the children and gentle and kind to yourself, that, if you're in that moment where things are just, they seem impossible, taking a breather, again, that self-care piece, going for a walk to clear air. I love what Dr. Shapiro said, turn on some music and just dance with the kids. They should feel a sense of joy and happiness and calm. And that comes from us as parents. It's a big responsibility, but in the home, especially with Zoom school now, we need to try our best to maintain that. And if it means that you have to take a break and your kid misses a class, this may be a little bit controversial, but your kid has to miss
controversial. Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
The class. Your kid can miss the class. I had one child that I actually pulled completely from school. She was not managing. She was not coping. And I said, for her mental health and for my mental health and for the family's mental health and for the family structure, she ain't doing Zoom school, and the chips will fall where they may. But you know what? It was the best decision for her and for the family structure. And of course, I'm going to be a responsible mother and help her and work on, figuring tutoring and that sort of thing. And what extra supports can we get in place, But
Naomi, I'm glad you brought up that, because so many kids really don't do well, I'm finding, in the group Zoom situation. Now, a lot of those kids do well in the individual Zoom situations, but not in the group Zoom situation. So, we do have to look for different educational options. But Kelly, Dr. Shapiro brought up he didn't use the word, but he basically said positive reinforcement. You got to be able to give kids some things to work, with what we're doing. As a teacher, what kind of positive reinforcements in what way do you feel you're doing anything different in terms of positive reinforcements when you're working with kids on Zoom? I've changed the prizes. I know that as a BCBA, my prizes are very, very different. Working a lot with Amazon. So, and it's actually making the kids very excited. But, are there different prizes that you're working on that you would never have thought of before the pandemic to be offering?
Well, and prizes, I think one of the things we forget is that they don't have to be something physical. It can be like, hey, you're going to earn a game, or you're going to earn an extra, 3 minutes alone with the teacher on Zoom while the other kids, are having their snack or whatever. It doesn't have to be something physical. Also, it could be like, hey, I'll mail you a postcard, right? Something simple like that. Kids, they love stuff like that, especially the younger kids. If you mail them a postcard telling them how awesome they are, they love that. So,
Kelly, what I've been doing with the kid, it's funny that you mentioned that. I have a child who likes to work with clay, and he likes to do show and tell. And I think we forgot that over Zoom, we really should be doing show and tell. And he would like to do show and tell the entire session. But what I've set up with him now is that every 15 minutes, I allow him to take a break and show me some of his clay things that he made, as long as he's able to return. So we have like a timer for show and tell.
I did that with my group last year when we were on Zoom. We've been in person pretty much this whole year, but last year when we were on Zoom, I kept track of who came on time. And at the end of the week, whoever was on time the most got to do a 3-minute show and tell. So everybody was wanting to come on time because they all wanted to do a show and tell. So it worked out really great.
Address the mental health perspective of families actually coming down with COVID, what that looks like, and what I call the psych COVID, the nervousness about getting COVID. I don't want to address the families that already got COVID because, hey, they got it. They've gotten through it. But I think there's a lot of families out there that we're doing a second round or a third round here in the different states, and how to prepare your children, and I don't think it's that different, from a flu, but, do we talk about what it's going to feel like? Do we talk, they're hearing a lot in the community. I know that there were some kids that I worked with, because our community has had a lot of publicized deaths in terms of leaders and things like that. They really view COVID as a killer, and that makes them very scared. So how, as parents, Dr. Shapiro, can we talk about maybe getting COVID without having nightmares?
Well, that is in some way, that's not a psychological question. I mean, in some ways, that's a medical question. I guess the psychology would be that lying isn't going to work. Right. I guess I would only echo my best understanding of the medical science, which is that children are at very, very low risk of having really serious illnesses with COVID. And it's sort of a dilemma, how to talk to children about any serious danger. There are kids that have always been coming to therapy because they're terrified of getting cancer, or they're terrified of a burglar breaking into their house and kidnapping them. And the dilemma is how to help children develop some sense of comfort with things that are not out and out impossible. It's relatively straightforward to reassure a fear of monsters, although it doesn't usually work, but at least you can say there's no such thing as monsters. But you can't say, don't worry, everybody gets over COVID, because you can't even quite say it for children. But I talk to kids about things that are very, 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 very unlikely. And I talk about it in terms of tiny, tiny, tiny fractions, like 1 grain of sand in a sandbox or something. We can never say that these things are impossible, because we're going to lose our credibility the first time the kid finds out, oh my God, there was a child who died of COVID. But that's the best we can realistically do, along with a sentiment like, so far so good, up till now we're fine. Nobody really knows what the future is going to bring, but with whatever happens, you'll respond. Your mom and dad will respond. If you need to get a doctor or go to the hospital, you will. And taking it one step at a time, and trying to focus more on the present is the ultimate response to anxiety. It's just, how are you today? Okay, well, let's take it one day at a time.
So Chana Perel, in the educational world, we were always talking about how important socialization is for children, and especially for adolescents. And this has been an incredibly weird year in terms of not being able to do religious practice, not being able to go to weddings, bar mitzvahs, everything over Zoom. How are the teenagers faring in all of this? And what would your advice be to parents of adolescents who feel like they've missed a year of graduations and bar mitzvahs and weddings?
Well, that's a loaded question.
I figured I'd give that to the social worker.
No, it's great. That's a great question. I actually just saw recently somebody said that we should coin the phrase GOMO, grief of missing out. And we should, right? Good. And we should just normalize that, like we all have GOMO from 2020. Right. I thought that was great, because there really is a part of grief involved. So I guess there's a few aspects of it. One of them is I don't really identify myself as a CBT therapist, but there definitely are parts of CBT from early in my career that I still use. And the Serenity Prayer is like gold for situations like this, like helping kids recognize that there's things in life really are binary, things that you can control and things that you can't. That's it. Life is binary in that way. And when I was younger, I saw a quote that said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. And that's really very powerful for kids. I don't know if anyone here knows, but I spent several years working in juvenile jails and prisons. And we talked a lot about that with the kids. Like, yeah, you're here for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. That's not changing. So do you want to be miserable and then make it worse for yourself? Or do you want to get your act together and go to school and get a job and work on your future planning and all this other stuff? So I think with these kids, it kind of goes back to what I was saying beforehand. There is an aspect of validation. I have my niece who's in seminary now, and she went after SUKIS, and then she was in quarantine because somebody got it. And this is not how they wanted to spend their seminary year. That's true. And that kind of falls into the validation. Like, that is sad and that is disappointing. And this is what it is. So how can you maximize it? And, two other brief thoughts come to mind. That one is, I gave a presentation today at a different school about maximizing your teenage years. And I asked the kids to list off all the different struggles that come along with being a teenager. Just that responsibility without authority, school, stressors, friend drama, family dynamics. And then I went through all of them and showed them how those exact struggles manifest as an adult, right? So when your colleague quits and now you have more responsibility, but not more authority. Work stressors, family drama, please, right? Like everything. And I said, the younger you are when you develop the mental muscle and the skills to navigate challenges that you can't control, the happier, calmer, more successful you'll be as you get older. And then the other aspect for people who, who openly talk about religion and talk about God in their life, I find that very powerful also to bring in faith over here. It's very powerful to realize that whether, you believe in the universe or you believe in God or a greater power, that nothing happens by accident. And God hasn't forgotten about you. So if we're impacted by this, let's see how we can maximize it and what we can do to grow through it rather than just going through it, while realizing, there is something bigger that we don't know about. And let's see what we can do with what we do know about.
So Naomi, as a mom, we've in the Jewish world gone through many Jewish holidays that have looked very, very different. And the non-Jewish world is going through Christmas, and I am sure their holidays are going to look very, very different. And as a mom, what can you do to make the holiday season still exciting as we've just gone through Hanukkah in a different way? Because we're experiencing every holiday just a little bit different.
Absolutely. I think it's pulling on that creative piece. In occupational therapy, one of the things that we do is we look at a situation that's difficult and we see how can we creatively change this? Do we adapt the environment? Do we adapt the person, or do we adapt the task, the occupation at hand? So, and I'm going to pull on a little bit of the serenity prayer, what she was just talking about, what Chana Perel was just talking about, and what's in our control. So again, examining our surroundings, examining ourselves as people, the children, and the task that's at hand. So can we change what's going on with the pandemic? Is that in our control?
Right.
No, that's not in our control. What is in our control?
Mm-hmm.
Let's focus on that. Let's circle back to that. So, there have been some wonderful programs in the community that we've, as a family, we've definitely tapped into and utilized. Drive-throughs, Hanukkah parade. We had a Hanukkah parade. We put a menorah on our car. We turned up the music. I mean, it's all about family and spending time together. Yes, it looks different this year. And it's important to acknowledge that to the children because they see right through it. If you're trying to, pretend that everything's all hunky-dory, they know, they can sense when things are different and when you feel a certain way. So I think acknowledging their feelings and saying, hey guys, we know it's different this year. We know we can't be with family. We know that, we're not physically together. We may have to jump on a family Zoom. We may need to be really creative with how we celebrate, but, showing them that there's still the joy in this time of year and really spending time as a family and putting our heads together. It's amazing how creative they can be if you give them the choice, power, and control, and you give the microphone over to them and say, hey guys, what do you think we should do? What is a great game that we can play, or how can we, bolster that sense of joy in our home right now?
Mm-hmm.
So Kelly, we in Tree of Knowledge deal with a lot of different children with all across the spectrum of needs. And I know one of the big areas that we deal with is children with autism with, high rigidity, where this transferring is not so easy for them. Do you have any suggestions in terms of working with that population?
Yeah, the most important thing to do is keep things as normal as possible. Keep the routine as much as possible. I mean, that's the best that you can do. And I like, this year is so different. And so I like to add in for all of my students, just a little bit of extra time for crisis. We seem to have a lot more meltdowns this year, a lot more behaviors coming up. Not that they're necessarily being naughty. They're struggling too. They're struggling as well. And so I teach second graders right now. So I try to just keep in mind to add in a little bit of extra time to focus on those things, and also trying to teach them, when I'm upset, what can I do? What are some strategies I can use when I'm sad? We talk about I allow them, I say, if you need a break, you come and tell me I need a break. And here are the things that you can do for that break. And so I have a lot of students utilizing that this year, but that would be the same for kids with autism, the same with any kids is having as much structure as possible and knowing what can I do if I'm melting down.
So originally when Shira came to me with this panel about dealing with COVID, I was just like, oh, really? Like, I think we're so done with it. And we talked about titles, and we said transitioning to a new world, because my original goal with this was, this was my dream. Maybe it was me being in denial. Oh, we're just going to all be vaccinated. We'll all be back. And I wanted to have a panel that kind of prepares us for being like Rumpelstiltskin, like waking up from this bad dream, and what, and bringing kids back into socialization and dealing with children that haven't seen faces, of other people outside of their immediate family, and what that's going to look like and how strange that's going to be. I don't know that we're there yet, but I kind of want to end tonight's session on just some tips of how do we prepare kids for getting back to normal, whatever that normal is. What kind of things are we going to have to reteach them as they start having to deal with more people, actually seeing facial expressions? Maybe they have to make facial expressions. Kids have been making lots of fun faces underneath their mask, and their motoric thing could get used to it. And then all of a sudden, people can actually see those facial expressions. So I want
Not just kids, Nicki. Not just kids.
Not just kids, right? I don't even know how we're going to all behave. So,
right,
exactly. So I just thought I would end the panel on a kind of like a positive note. So we wake up and we're all back to life. How do we transition? Dr. Shapiro, I'm going to start with you.
Oh my goodness, that's really unfair. That is a really hard question. That I guess it might. Well, I have not thought about it before. It would probably make sense for parents and teachers to try to find ways to ease the transition so that it's not binary, because binary transitions are very hard for people. And it's when we actually get to that day, it might make a certain amount of sense to kind of wean off the Zoom thing and start doing a lot of the day in person and maintaining some of the Zoom, because people need to have some kind of a balance of familiarity and novelty in their lives. Maybe we're going to find that there are some, I don't know, they'll become like traditions that were formed during the pandemic, and maybe people will want to hang on to. And I guess I would argue for a gradual transition so that it doesn't happen all at once. That would be the thought that comes to me.
So, Chana Perel, I know some women that tell me, I am loving my life. As soon as 5 o'clock hits, I'm in my pajamas. I'm not going out at night.
Yes.
I don't have to go anywhere. This is absolutely great. But I don't think this is going to be forever. And so we're going to have to, I guess, emotionally prepare ourselves to go back into socialization.
So yeah, I'm going to actually kind of take a different stance from Dr. Shapiro a little bit on this. And then I'll kind of target with what you just ended with, Nicki. But I think that, I really, I believe in muscle memory tremendously, emotionally as well as physically. And I think that a lot of things are like riding a bike. And I think that my thought is to stay curious and to stay open. And one of my favorite things we say is the brain is designed to heal itself when the conditions are right. And I wonder if the kids can just kind of like burst outside, go play with each other, have a play date, have a sleepover, go to restaurants, do everything. I wonder if that'll do harm versus possibly just doing good and helping them just have that sense of familiarity. I almost look at it as when we're in a different country for an extended period of time and then we come back. You know, when you come back from Israel, the Coke bottles look different, the billboards look different. It takes a few days to adjust, but then you're just right back to your home and you feel like you're back at home. So I wonder if just kind of, you know, trusting the kids, whatever they feel comfortable with, whatever they're interested in, you know, running back and doing right away, and then just staying curious and open and wondering how are they responding to, you know, this new freedom and not having all these restrictions. I also think it's a great opportunity to implement the concept of gratitude. We all know the benefits, the long-term health benefits and mental health benefits from experiencing gratitude. It actually releases, is it serotonin in your brain? It releases one of the four, oh no, it's the one with the C. It releases a happy chemical in your brain when you experience gratitude. And I think it's a cool opportunity as the kids start or the families start, you know, reacclimating to our previous life or the new life. Just making a list somewhere or having like a run-on Google Docs sheet or whiteboard in your house of, oh, I got to do this today, I got to do this today. Because it would just be a lost opportunity if we just go right back to life as things are. We take things for granted and we lose that like excitement and appreciation that can come along with these, you know, the lack of restrictions. Hopefully that'll happen soon. In terms of people like me who love being in my house and I love being not with other people. I know I'm a social worker, yes. I think that there are new patterns that people have developed, like exercising at home, mindfulness, turning their phones off for certain periods of time, spending more time together with their husband. I think these are all patterns that people can intentionally and consciously retain in a balanced way. So for people who've identified with this lifestyle and have flourished with this lifestyle, they can absolutely take an intentional inventory of what can I retain that won't negatively impact my life and those around me as the world kind of goes back to what we're hoping for.
Naomi, there's a lot of talk about kindness during the pandemic and teaching your children to participate, whether it's helping at the food banks or whether it's writing notes or whether it's calling shut-in seniors. What has your family done to sort of, you know, help with that? And do you feel that they've learned some more kindness over this pandemic that will kind of take them into the new world?
Such a great question. I think for this particular topic, I choose to lead by example. I think I didn't, you know, whether I did it intentionally or unintentionally, I didn't want to put any more on them. They're already, you know, struggling just to keep up. I had a couple of different thoughts as people were talking, but just, you know, re-socialization. One of my children who's super social, like me, more of an extrovert, she wasn't in school for a couple of weeks when we had to quarantine. Someone came knocking on the door, a couple of kids, to say hello. She didn't even want to go say hello to them. It was so strange. It was almost so foreign for me to step back and say, you know, it's so interesting to watch from her perspective that she just couldn't bring herself to go downstairs and talk to her friends. So I think I'm going to circle back to my word of being gentle. We have to be gentle on them as we reacclimate. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And in terms of, you know, your question more specifically, I think that as parents and as community members, we can contribute to the fabric of our community, and we can show them that joy and happiness in service and in you know, taking care of our own. I think it's such a special thing to be able to do. There's so many different opportunities. There are people, wherever situation you're in, somebody has it worse than you. So I think that, you know, looking out for our friends, our neighbors, our community members, picking up the phone if you haven't heard from someone in a while. There are many people that are lonely in our community. This is a great, great learning example for our children. And what Chana Perel said, to show gratitude as well, because we can show our kids, hey, you know, we may be struggling in X, Y, and Z, but you know, there's someone else out there that's going through an even harder time. Why don't we pick up the phone and call them? Why don't we, you know, pay them a socially distanced visit, bring them some hot food? So we are ripe with opportunities to give back to the community, and to open up our kids' eyes to that.
Kelly, what's a way within teaching that we can add, you know, the gratitude, maybe a gratitude journal as part of the writing goals, or a kindness thing? What are some of the things that you've seen as a teacher that can incorporate those two very strong things that we hope we're imparting on our children during this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, gratitude journals are an excellent way to do that. Just reminding them on a daily basis. Have you done anything nice for one of your neighbors today? And when I say neighbors, I mean other students in the classroom, right? We're battling in my current classroom with a little bit of students battling with each other.
Oh, that's so during the pandemic.
Yes,
they love each other.
Well, so we're practicing being kind and being aware when we're not being kind. And so they'll give me this scenario. This is what happened. So they had a fight, and I take each of their sides. This is what happened. And the other girl says, and this is what happened. And I say, at what point during that could you have turned things around for the better? And then they think way back to the beginning of the argument, and they say, right here, I could have done this. Okay, well, think about doing that the next time. So just sort of a mindfulness of reminding them of a mindfulness of what they're doing and how their actions affect others, and to always try to be kind with each other, because we're all we have. I mean, we're all we have, our community. You know, we're here for each other, not to fight against each other.
I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our panelists. It's a pleasure. I actually always learn something. Thank you, Dr. Shapiro. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Chana Perel. Thank you, Naomi. And we here at Tree of Knowledge are always available to you. If you need any of the people's emails, feel free to contact Shira Levine in the Tree of Knowledge office, and she'll be happy to share that with you. Kelly, what's the Cleveland Heights number for those parents that are listening?
I don't have it memorized.
Okay, I think it's 216-851-2221. I think
that
so.
Sounds right.
That sounds right. The Miami number is 305-705-4470. And the New Jersey office is 732-987-5500. So if anybody needs to get a hold of us, my email is nsalfer@learningtreemiami.com. Feel free to send us any questions that you have from this panel. We'll be happy to share them with the panelists. We thank you all for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, have gratitude, and remain positive. Talk to you later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.